Hey there. So, a couple of people have asked for a video guide for the injury systems for injuries and vile deeds, and that's what I'm going to provide you with today. If you're looking for just examples and not an overview of the mechanics, you can skip ahead to near the end of the video. As you probably already know if you're watching this video, the injury systems were designed to restore excitement to combat by providing rules for cinematic, tactical encounters. Player character injuries create narrative tension, keeping the party on its toes as they weigh the risks of pressing on or allowing their enemies to get a step ahead. Meanwhile, players can add mechanical effects to descriptive combat, inflicting injuries on their enemies and causing negative status effects with every action. Injuries are most commonly inflicted on enemies by making attacks against them, either with a spell or a weapon. But some spells and abilities introduced in the book also inflict injuries directly. This gives all characters, especially martial characters, more flavorful attack outcomes and more tactical options in combat so that no turn feels repetitive. Injure a foe enough, and they become imperiled, at risk of being slain instantly with a death blow. So, when does a character become injured? Let's start by talking about the most common type of injury, core injuries. Player characters gain core injuries when they take large amounts of damage relative to their maximum hit points. Specifically, this occurs when damage from a single action, including multi-attack, exceeds their injury threshold. When this happens, the player rolls on the table with the appropriate severity and then describes how they receive an injury, described in the table. PCs have four thresholds: setback, dangerous, handicap, and deadly, plus two injury severities that don't have damage thresholds: lethal and death. They can gain one core injury at each severity. The threshold that will be referenced most often is the setback threshold, or the lowest threshold for injury and the lowest severity of injury. This is something like a twisted ankle. There are two reasons for this. First, while a PC is conscious, they can't suffer a core injury higher than setback severity. Second, while a PC is unconscious, their setback threshold is lowered, making it easier for them to become injured. This applies as soon as they hit 0 hit points, so a blow that knocks them out is much more likely to injure them. That first point might make you wonder how a PC could ever gain an injury of higher severity, let alone one that has no damage threshold. Well, when a PC gains a core injury that's the same severity as the one they already have, that injury severity is increased. This means that over time, minor injuries like setbacks will tend to build into more and more severe injuries, which in turn leads to a point at which a party must choose to whether to fight and risk almost certain death, or to rest for a while, perhaps allowing their enemies' plans to accelerate without the party there to stop them. Alright, so that mostly covers PC injuries. Let's talk about how players can injure their foes. Unlike player characters, NPCs and monsters only have three thresholds for core injuries: dangerous, handicap, and deadly. However, they also have aspects, like attacks or mobility, that players can target rather than randomly determining the injury as is done for PC injuries. From a purely mechanical standpoint, all a player needs to do to injure an enemy is, when they make an attack as part of an action, they declare that they are trying to inflict an injury, and state which aspect they're targeting. They then roll to hit and roll damage as normal, and compare the total damage dealt against their foe's injury thresholds. They can also add in any damage from weapon or unarmed attacks made with their bonus action. However, from a flavor standpoint, what I encourage tables to do is to have players describe their attack, where on their foe they're targeting, what effect they would like to have, etc. Based on the description, the DM would offer the most likely aspect, and then the player proceeds with their attacks. This encourages a description without necessarily adjusting how players describe attacks if they already do so. Each aspect can gain an injury at each of the three thresholds, and just as with PC injuries, whenever an aspect is injured at a threshold that already has an injury, that new injury's severity increases. Alright, so mechanics-wise, we're all set, but it'll probably be helpful to go through a couple of examples. Let's start with a PC getting injured. Say we have a frontline warrior, a fighter, with 70 hit points. Their party is facing down a giant whose club packs quite a punch, and during the fight he's hit for a whopping 35 damage. Luckily for the fighter, he remains standing after the blow, but it does still cause an injury. Because they're conscious, they roll in the setback table, even though it meets his dangerous threshold. The results say he has a twisted ankle, and he describes how he took the blow on his shield using his shoulder and legs to absorb the shock. However, their foot was on a small rock, which rolls beneath the added weight, and their foot twists beneath them, twisting their ankle. That night, the party gets a long rest, and he decreases the duration of the injury by one night, needing just one more night's rest to fully heal. Because it's such a minor injury, the speed reduction doesn't affect him the next day, so they decide to leave it to heal naturally the next night, despite knowing they'll be entering combat again that day. This time, they're up against a small horde of goblins. Each goblin's blow doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but by the time the fighter reaches the goblin chieftain, he's at pretty low health. A blow from the chieftain reduces him to 0, dealing just 12 damage. Normally, if he'd been conscious, this wouldn't be a problem. However, at 0 hit points, his setback threshold is halved, reduced to 10, and that 12 damage inflicts an injury. Not only that, but because he still has his setback from yesterday, the injury is now one of dangerous severity. He rolls and gets the dazed injury. His player describes how he falls and hits his head on the hard stone floor as the fighter falls unconscious. Hopefully that's a helpful example of how PC injuries work, so now let's go through one for an NPC. An Eldritch Knight who uses 2 weapons is fighting a fallen paladin. On her first action, she casts Firebolt, targeting the paladin's sword arm and trying to injure it. She hits and deals damage. Unfortunately for her, the paladin is resistant to fire, and that reduces the damage dealt by her spell such that it doesn't meet the paladin's injury threshold. However, the Eldritch Knight's class feature also allows her to make a weapon attack as a bonus action whenever she casts a cantrip, so she closes the distance and swings with a short sword, landing another hit and dealing damage. Because it was a weapon attack, she is able to combine its damage with her firebolt and just barely get over the paladin's injury threshold. The paladin gains a dangerous injury to its attacks, making them less effective at fighting back. On her next turn, the Eldritch Knight uses the attack action, and in combination with 2-weapon fighting makes 3 attacks. She misses one, but still manages to reach the paladin's dangerous injury threshold again. Because the paladin's attack aspect is already injured at that severity, the paladin instead gains the next highest severity injury. Thanks for watching through all of that. There are a couple of details I didn't talk about, like recovery and death blows, but I hope you have a better understanding of how the injury systems work for both PCs and their enemies. Aside from these systems, the book has around 200 new feats, items, spells, subclasses, PC backgrounds, terrifying monsters, and villainous NPCs to add to your game, all interacting with the injury systems to provide additional flavor and unique abilities focused on harming foes or surviving injuries. If you have any questions or want to see videos on other parts of the injury systems like recovery or special injuries, please let me know in the comments. And of course, if you liked the video, give it a like. If you want to see more videos whenever I release them, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon. The book and add-ons from the Kickstarter are all still purchasable for a little while through pre-order on BackerKit. Link in the description, so definitely go grab a copy if you haven't already. Till next time, see ya.